The night sky above the Nevada desert was always expansive, a boundless black canvas pierced by distant pinpricks of starlight. Yet, on one peculiar evening, the stars moved. First, it was subtle, like a child flicking marbles across the velvet black. Then it became undeniable. Farmers abandoned their irrigation systems to gape slack-jawed at constellations pirouetting like ballroom dancers. Amateur astronomers reported glowing objects weaving patterns too precise to be meteoric. By the time the local news stations picked up the phenomenon, the military was already scrambling. At the Nevada test range, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Porter had been monitoring strange radar blips for hours. "It's static," he'd muttered at first, brushing crumbs off his monitor. But as the blips grew into coordinated movements, his confidence faltered. At 2:47 a.m., Porter made a decision that would alter the course of history. He picked up the red phone and uttered words no one on the receiving end ever wanted to hear. "Unidentified object, sir. Too big for anything human." The object appeared at dawn, hovering miles above the test range. A leviathan of shimmering liquid metal, it undulated in the air as if alive. It cast no shadow, emitted no sound, and defied all known physics. President Harold Gaines received the call shortly after breakfast, a quiet affair of burnt toast and regret-laden coffee. "What do you mean it's hovering?" he barked at the National Security Advisor. "Is it a drone? A trick? One of those damn Chinese things?" "No, Mr. President," came the trembling reply. It's not from this planet." At 10:13 a.m., the craft descended. Military personnel surrounded it, weapons drawn but useless. The craft opened with a sound like a deep exhale, and 3 figures emerged. The beings were human-shaped but translucent, their glowing veins pulsating like soft neon. They spoke no words but conveyed a calm authority. "They want to speak with you," General Harlan grunted over a secure line. The president sighed. "Fine. Tell them I'll meet them in the Oval. And someone get me a damn drink." The Calyx introduced themselves with an air of detached benevolence. Their leader Ntala spoke English with unnerving precision, claiming to have learned it by absorbing human data streams. "What's in it for you?" President Gaines asked suspiciously, his whiskey trembling in his hand. "Curiosity," Ntala replied. "And a seat at your table of power." The Calyx promised wonders beyond imagining, limitless energy, disease eradication, and technological advancement centuries ahead of human capabilities. In exchange, they demanded cooperation and access to Earth's geopolitical stage. Gaines, ever the opportunist, saw not an alliance but a coup de grace for American supremacy. "Welcome aboard," he said with a grin. Within weeks, America transformed. Calyxian energy domes powered cities, vehicles floated without wheels, diseases vanished overnight. Corporate executives wept tears of joy as alien technology sent stock prices soaring. The rest of the world watched with a mix of awe and dread. American diplomats paraded their newfound supremacy with smug grins, leaving allies and adversaries alike to stew in envy. In secret, however, a more sinister project began. The Calyx offered blueprints for a weapon, a safeguard, Ntala called it. The president, seduced by the promise of unparalleled dominance, greenlit the project immediately. Deep beneath the Nevada desert, a team of scientists toiled in secrecy. The weapon, codenamed Project Nightshade, was unlike anything they'd ever seen. It didn't use conventional explosives or even nuclear reactions. Instead, it manipulated reality itself. Dr. Eleanor Voss, the project's lead physicist, was the first to voice concerns. "This thing doesn't just kill," she whispered during a late-night briefing. "It warps. It leaves reality in shreds." Her warnings were ignored. The president demanded results, and results he would get. On a quiet Pacific atoll, the first test of the thing commenced. From a safe distance, observers watched as the weapon activated. It began with a hum low, almost soothing. Then came the light. Not a bright flash but a kaleidoscope of colors that defied description, twisting into patterns that seemed to mock human comprehension. The atoll vanished. In its place was a gaping void that radiated an eerie stillness. Scientists noted disturbing side effects. Animals in the area displayed signs of temporal disorientation. Shadows moved independently. Footage of the test leaked, sparking international outrage. The president, undeterred, shrugged off criticism. "This is how we keep the world safe," he declared. Strange phenomena began to appear near test sites. Birds flew in reverse. People reported vivid dreams of alien landscapes. Some vanished entirely, leaving behind only faint impressions on walls. Dr. Voss begged the administration to stop. Reality itself is unraveling, she warned. But the president, drunk on power and approval ratings, dismissed her as alarmist. Meanwhile, the calyx grew distant. Ntala, once eager to share wisdom, became evasive. "You are not prepared for the consequences," he said cryptically. His final test was scheduled for Independence Day, a symbolic display of American dominance. Crowds gathered to watch live broadcasts, unaware of the true stakes. As the thing activated, something went catastrophically wrong. Reality folded inward. Time frakturet. Spectators found themselves reliving fragments of their lives, trapped in endless loops. Shadows gained sentience, whispering secrets in languages no one understood. The calyx, immune to the chaos, watched from their craft. Humans were not ready, Tala murmured, a hint of sorrow in his luminous eyes. America descended into madness. Cities became labyrinths of impossible geometry. Survivors spoke of voices from beyond, promising salvation but delivering only despair. The president, a hollow shell of his former self, begged Ntala for help. "We gave you power," Tala replied coldly. "You misused it." And with that, the calyx departed, leaving Earth to unravel in the mess it had created. When the calyx ship ascended and disappeared into the starless void left in the aftermath of the thing's malfunction, Earth was no longer Earth. From the Nevada desert to the bustling streets of New York City, reality fractured like a broken mirror. Entire blocks of skyscrapers floated mid-air, their foundations twisted into spiraling tendrils. Streets folded into themselves, forming tunnels where whispers echoed in languages never spoken by man. In small towns and suburbs, time lost meaning. Families sat down for dinner, only to find their plates rotting with food that had aged centuries. In other cases, people discovered themselves split, duplicated versions of their bodies arguing, merging, or vanishing altogether. But the worst horrors were reserved for those who had been closest to the thing's detonation. They became something else. Witnesses described them as ghosts of flesh, their forms translucent, flickering, and constantly rearranging. They didn't speak, they screamed. The president's advisors were the first to suggest total martial law, but the concept quickly lost meaning when the Pentagon itself vanished overnight, replaced by a sprawling blackened crater that hummed with a sound only dogs seemed to hear. President Gaines barricaded himself in the White House with what was left of his cabinet. The Oval Office, once the heart of power, had taken on a sinister air. Shadows flickered across the walls, cast by no discernible light source. Occasionally, the disembodied voice of the president's late wife whispered from the corners, saying things she had never said in life. General Harlan, now a grizzled and desperate figure, slammed his fist on the desk. "We have to regain control. Use the military. Do something, sir." "Control?" The president spat, his eyes bloodshot. "We built control, Harlan. This is what it looks like when it breaks." Dr. Voss, who had been dragged into the bunker against her will, stared at the president with unbridled fury. "I warned you. You had to play God, didn't you? Now look at us." Before the president could reply, the room grew cold. The windows frosted over, despite the sweltering July heat outside. The chandelier began to swing, though there was no breeze. Then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, like distant voices carried on the wind. Then they grew louder, forming words, names, pleas, accusations. Every person in the room recognized the voices of loved ones they had lost. "Harold," came a voice that made the president freeze. It was his mother's voice, though she had been dead for 30 years. "Why did you do this?" The lights flickered. Harlan drew his sidearm, pointing it at the shadows, but the gun melted in his hand like wax. Voss screamed as the walls of the Oval Office began to twist, stretching outward into a spiraling hallway that defied logic. One by one, the president's advisors were pulled into the vortex, their screams cutting off as the shadows swallowed them whole. The situation outside the White House was no better. In Chicago, the Sears Tower folded downward, bending like a grotesque flower to form a tunnel leading into the sky. People who entered never returned, though their distorted laughter sometimes echoed from the structure. In Los Angeles, the Hollywood Hills were overrun by strange luminous plants that grew at an impossible rate. Some who touched them claimed to hear voices promising salvation. Others dissolved into light, leaving only their shadows behind. The Midwest became a wasteland where the ground rippled like water, and creatures made of flickering static stalked survivors. Those creatures were vaguely human-shaped, but their limbs were too long, and their faces lacked features. In New York City, where the chaos had first erupted, survivors barricaded themselves in subway tunnels, only to find the walls shifting around them. Some tunnels led to nowhere, others opened into vast, alien landscapes beneath the city, where black suns hung in green skies. As days turned into weeks, a new power rose amid the chaos, the cult of Nightshade. Formed by those who believed the thing was a divine instrument, they worshipped it as a harbinger of humanity's evolution. The cult spread quickly, feeding on desperation. Its followers wore robes stitched from fragments of reality itself, patches of fabric that shimmered and warped unnaturally. They preached that the fractures in the world were not disasters but gateways to enlightenment. At their center was a figure known only as the Oracle, a former scientist from Project Nightshade who had succumbed to madness. The Oracle's sermons echoed through the airwaves, hijacking every frequency with chilling proclamations. Embrace the void, for it is our true inheritance. The cult began converging on the Nevada test range, drawn by the remnants of the thing's energy. Survivors who tried to flee the area described seeing figures with glowing veins, Calixian in appearance, but twisted into monstrous forms. Dr. Voss, now one of the last rational minds left in the government, hatched a desperate plan: contact the Calix. If they won't fix this, she told the president, then we'll force them to. Using remnants of Calixian technology scavenged from abandoned labs, Voss built a crude transmitter capable of reaching beyond Earth. But the signal required a massive power source, one that could only be found at the epicenter of the catastrophe, the Nevada test range. Reluctantly, the president agreed. With a skeleton crew of loyalists and soldiers, they boarded a military transport and headed west, into the heart of the madness. The journey to Nevada was harrowing. The skies were filled with creatures that resembled manta rays but shimmered like oil slicks. The roads were littered with cars whose occupants had been petrified into statues of ash, their faces frozen in expressions of agony. When they reached the test range, they found it unrecognizable. The ground pulsed like a living thing, and the air was thick with a metallic taste. At the center of the chaos stood the thing, now a towering monolith of impossible geometry, its surface covered in shifting symbols that hurt to look at. Voss set up the transmitter while the president stared at the monolith, muttering incoherently. "This was supposed to make us gods," he whispered. "Now look at us. Look at me." As the transmitter powered on, the Calix answered almost immediately. The Calix ship appeared in the sky, descending with the same eerie grace as before. Ntala emerged, his glowing veins dimmer than before, his expression unreadable. "You call us back," he said, his voice heavy with disdain. "Why?" "Fix this," the president begged, dropping to his knees. "We'll give you anything. Just fix it." Ntala regarded him with cold detachment. "You were given power. You abused it. This is your legacy." Dr. Voss stepped forward. "If you won't help, then tell us how to stop it." Ntala's eyes flickered. "There is no stopping it," he said. "Your species was not ready for the responsibility. Now you will be remembered as a cautionary tale, a flicker in the endless night." And with that, the Calix departed once more, leaving humanity to face the unraveling of its own making. The sky was no longer blue. It wasn't any one color but a shifting, churning spectrum of hues that didn't belong in this world. The air carried a weight that pressed against lungs, forcing every breath to be a conscious effort. The Nevada test range, once the stage for humanity's boldest ambitions, now lay at the center of a surreal and hellish landscape, where the rules of existence bent and shattered with every passing moment. Dr. Eleanor Voss stood alone before the monolith that had once been the thing. It towered above her, an alien spire of shifting, ungraspable geometry. Its surface rippled with patterns that made her stomach churn just to look at them. Behind her lay the husks of those who had accompanied her, soldiers, engineers, even the president himself. One by one, they had succumbed to the madness of this place. President Gaines was the last to fall. Moments ago he had stood with her, his once commanding presence reduced to a muttering hollow shell. "It wasn't supposed to be this way," he had whispered, staring at the glowing fissures in the ground. Then he had stepped into one, his body swallowed by the void, his shadow lingering for just a moment longer than it should have. Voss had not stopped him. There was nothing left to say. Now, she alone faced the monolith, her transmitter humming faintly beside her. The calyx had left them to their fate, but she wasn't ready to surrender. Somewhere, deep in the recesses of her fractured mind, she still believed there was a way to make this right. She activated the transmitter one final time, sending a desperate wideband signal into the stars. Her voice cracked as she spoke. To anyone out there. To anyone who can hear me. We need help. We didn't understand what we were doing. Please, she paused, her throat tightening. Please don't let this be how it ends. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, to her astonishment, the monolith responded. It began to pulse, each beat reverberating through the ground like the tolling of a colossal bell. The patterns on its surface shifted, forming symbols that she couldn't read but somehow understood. You seek absolution, it seemed to say. Yes, Voss whispered, falling to her knees. Yes, I do. For all of us. The monolith's pulsing grew louder, faster, until the very air seemed to vibrate with its rhythm. The sky above darkened, the swirling colors coalescing into a single point of brilliant white light. A voice, ancient and vast, neither human nor calyx, spoke directly into her mind. You were warned. Yet you sought dominion over forces you could not comprehend. This is the folly of your kind. Tears streamed down her face. I know we failed. But please, if there's a way to fix this. There is no fixing, the voice interrupted, its tone neither cruel nor kind. Only choice. Before her, the monolith began to split open, revealing an infinite void within. From its depths emerged a vision, earth whole and unbroken, bathed in the soft light of a new dawn. She saw children playing in fields, cities alive with laughter, and a world that had learned from its mistakes. But then the vision shifted. The same earth appeared, but this time it was desolate, barren, a wasteland where nothing moved and no life could take root. These are your options, the voice said. One path demands sacrifice. The other guarantees extinction. Voss's heart raced. What sacrifice? The annihilation of your species' memory, the voice replied. We will rewind your existence, removing all trace of what you were. Humanity will never have existed, its potential erased. In this way, your mistakes will be undone, and the world will heal. She recoiled, her mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the choice. And the other path. The world remains as it is, broken and doomed. Humanity will linger in agony until it fades into oblivion. No other being will intervene. Voss's mind churned. Could she erase everything? Billions of lives, every triumph and failure, every song, every story, gone? But what was the alternative? To let this nightmare continue, dragging all life into the abyss? Her hands trembled as she placed them on the monolith's surface. If we choose to erase ourselves, will anyone remember? Will anything of us remain? The voice was silent for a long time. Then it spoke one final time. A whisper. An echo in the void. Voss closed her eyes. The memories of her life flashed before her, her parents, her friends, the first time she looked through a telescope and dreamed of reaching the stars. She thought of all the beauty and terror of humanity, of its boundless potential and its fatal flaws. Her decision was made. I choose the echo. The monolith pulsed one last time, its light growing brighter and brighter until it consumed everything. Far across the galaxy, on a distant world untouched by the chaos of Earth, a child gazed up at the night sky. He tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing at a faint, flickering star. What's that one called? He asked. His mother smiled, though she didn't recognize the star. I'm not sure, she said. But maybe it's trying to tell us a story. And for just a moment, the star seemed to glow a little brighter, as if it had heard her. Then it faded, leaving only the vast, endless night. Humanity was gone, but its echo remained, a faint, indelible mark on the universe, a story whispered into the void.